Welcome. Today's video lecture is about the process of natural selection and how it is responsible for causing genetic change in populations over time. If you remember, that's evolution, so this video lecture is going to cover evolution by natural selection. Natural selection is not the only way that evolution occurs, however it is the way that was proposed by Charles Darwin, and it is still seen by most biologists as the primary way in which evolution occurs in living systems. As you listen to this lecture today, you will be taking notes in your notebook. Please go ahead and get out your notebook and set up a notes page like this, and as you progress, take these notes. This is an adapted Cornell note style with topics written in the left-hand margin. Notes will be taken over here. This section where you describe the component, explain why it's necessary, and give an example is going to be the longest part of your notes, so you should give that the most room. Natural selection has a couple of requirements before it can occur. First, there must be variation in a species. Second, there must be a struggle for survival. And third, certain individuals, as a result of variation and a struggle for survival, are going to be more likely to reproduce. We're going to go through each of these in detail. Natural selection and evolution in general is best understood, in my opinion, through case studies or examples, real-world examples of the process occurring. It makes it easier for you to visualize the process. So I'm going to use an example to explain each of the three components of natural selection and then talk about the result. The example or the case study I'm going to use is that of a common insect in our area called a katydid. Now it is common, although many of you probably have never seen it because it is particularly good at camouflage. So here is a katydid, a normal katydid standing on, in this case, a grape leaf. And you will see that its body is particularly well designed to provide camouflage and hide it from predators. So we will use this as an example of natural selection. If you remember, the first component of natural selection is that there has to be variation in a species. Variation refers to different varieties. Part of what I'm going to expect you to be able to do when you explain to me how natural selection works is that you can explain to me what variation is and why it's necessary. So, first of all, what is variation, or how is it created? Variation is created by mutations in the DNA. In the case of the katydids, those mutations in the DNA have led to 3 different genes. These genes, pieces of DNA that have the information for producing proteins, produce proteins that create 3 different color traits in the katydid: the green, yellow, and pink. And all 3 of these are natural examples of genes that are found in katydids. So if this one looks kind of crazy to you, this is an actual picture of a katydid, one of the color variations that can occur as a result of mutations to the exact same gene. So, the second component of natural selection is that individuals will struggle for survival. So in this diagram here we see a common wren, which is or maybe this is a chipping sparrow, I'm not sure. Anyway, a predator of the katydid, and we see it here holding a katydid in its mouth. We also over here see a population of katydids, essentially a bunch of pictures of katydids, but they're meant to represent the population of katydids living in the area where this sparrow is hunting. There's going to be a struggle for survival among these katydids. They're struggling to get resources, so they're competing with each other, but they're also struggling not to be eaten, in this case, by this sparrow. So as you look at these pictures, some of these katydids are obviously going to be eaten more frequently than others because it'll be easier for the sparrow, which does have color vision, to identify prey if they are brightly colored like these yellow and pink ones are here. The third component: certain individuals are going to tend to leave more offspring. As a result of predation by this sparrow, some of these katydids are more likely to die, and therefore less likely to reproduce. Those individuals that get more resources or are not killed will produce more children and pass on their DNA. So if we think of this chipping sparrow living in the field, picking off katydids as it sees them, it's only natural to expect that some of these katydids will be eaten by our friend the sparrow. I should just drag them right over here and put them underneath the sparrow, because these are going to be eaten by the sparrow. And occasionally the sparrow will probably find a green katydid, but it's going to find a lot more, or a higher proportion, of the colored katydids. Therefore, when it comes time to reproduce, there are going to be more of the green colored katydids to pass on their DNA to their children. And that leads us to the third part of natural selection, or the result of natural selection. So here we have pictures that are meant to represent the next generation. After the bird has eaten the katydids that it can find and picked out most of the pink and the yellow ones, leaving mostly green ones to reproduce, in the next generation you will find a greater number of green katydids. Okay? This explains why green katydids are so much more common. So the result of those three components is that certain traits will tend to be more common in the population over time. Over many generations, those genes, those mutations that produce a green trait, that genes that produce a green trait, are going to be more likely to survive, more likely to pass on their DNA, and therefore those traits will become more common. So individuals that carry beneficial genes will have more children. Their children will also have the beneficial genes, in this case the green coloring, to help them blend in. And the net result of this whole process is that there will have been a genetic change in the population over a period of time, over a period of generations, which is the definition of evolution. Okay, so that's a genetic change, a change in the frequency of the genes that create a green trait. They become more common over time. That's evolution. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is get out another sheet, or on the back side of the note sheet that you've been taking, I'd like you to write the following table, although you may want to give yourself more room in the application area. One of the ways I'm going to assess you on your understanding of natural selection is that you remember the principles, but more importantly, can you apply those principles to a real life situation like the example of the katydids. So I want you to fill out a table, fill in this column, and then in this column I want you to write specifically how the katydids display this principle. How do katydids show that all living things have genetic variation? What is their genetic variation? How do they demonstrate it? How do katydids show that living things struggle for survival? What is their struggle? How are they struggling? A description here. How do the katydids show that certain individuals tend to leave more offspring, and so on? Take a few minutes, finish that. When you are done with that, when you feel like you have written what you consider to be a good, complete answer, I want you to come back to the video and I will show you what I consider to be complete answers. So please pause the video now and return when you are done. Okay, here's what I consider to be good, complete answers. First principle, all living things have genetic variation. In the katydids, the way I would apply that is by saying that katydids have genes, so I'm talking about the genetic characteristic. They have genes that produces differences in the color traits. Okay, so I'm not saying they have different color genes, I'm saying they have genes that produce different colored traits. Remember that difference between the word genes and the word traits. And then I describe what the traits are, pink, yellow, and green. Living things struggle for survival. Katydids are constantly competing for resources, so that is one of the things that katydids are attempting to get: food, water, shelter space, and a mate. However, in this example, it's the fact that they are attempting to avoid being eaten or killed. Their color directly affects the likelihood of being eaten because it helps them to hide. Third principle, certain individuals will tend to leave more offspring. In this example, green katydids are better camouflaged. So in each generation, more will survive being eaten by the birds. This means green katydids will reproduce each year, resulting in more genes for green color being passed to the next generation. The overall result of this is that certain traits will tend to be more common in a population. Because more individuals will produce with genes to produce green color will reproduce, the green trait has become the most common in the population over time. This is evolution. This is what I would like you to be able to do for a variety of real-life scenarios that I will give you in class.